now, just so you know. And again, if you want to share, we will have an opportunity around 12:45 for you to be able to do that. But in the meantime, please do keep your mics muted. We're going to be monitoring the chat. So again, feel free to type your questions there. At this time, I want to introduce one of South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light's leaders. Our leadership council is made up of people from across the state, faith leaders from across the state, and King Divine is here today, I think from the West Coast, but he is a South Carolina native who is going to open us up with some inspirational words.
Peace, peace, panel. How you guys doing? I just wanted to start the discussion off with a moment of silence and some reflective words as we engage in the summer heat and the discussion on the heat and being aware. So at this moment, let's just take a brief pause of silence. Thank you. With that said, you want to be prepared for the summer heat. Just as Ms. Brewster said, I'm a South Carolina native from the PD area, King Street, South Carolina, Gullah Geechee Nation corridor. We're facing high humid heat. So one thing that I want to advise residents of South Carolina that's facing similar situations, take advantage and respect nature. You want to take advantage of going inside the house at the hottest times of between 12 and 2 to be safe. You want to also make sure you stay hydrated as well. Hydrating various aspects as far as water, but you also want to make sure you indulge in eating summer fruits such as watermelons, cantaloupe, cucumbers. Those fruits are made of over 75% water. So that means you're hydrating while you're eating. So make sure that you respect nature, respect the heat, stay safe, stay hydrated. And thank you guys for having me. And I'm very interested in learning more about how we can work collectively and collaboratively to keep our environment safe. Peace.
Thank you so much for that moment of silence and for sharing with us. And we will definitely take heed to that wise advice. At this time, I am going to open up our panel discussion by introducing our moderator for today. So Dr. Brandon Emery is actually the brainchild behind this series. Dr. Emery is a pediatrician in Lexington, South Carolina, and he's the current chair of pediatrics at Lexington Medical Center. Brandon's also a founding member of the South Carolina Health Professionals for Climate Action, and he's completed the Yale School of Public Health's Climate Change and Health Certificate course. In addition to being a founding member and also being a physician, I think that this topic is very important to Brandon because from my understanding, you're a dad as well. Happy Father's Day. And I know that like me, we are very interested in making sure that we are doing what we can to protect our children in the future of our community, South Carolina and beyond. So this is a timely conversation because it does impact all of us, and in particular, some of our youngest in our community. So thank you so much, Brandon, for offering this topic and the series.
Well, thanks for putting this together. It's fantastic. And we got a great panel today to help with this discussion. Like you said, it is very important to me. I feel like extreme heat in particular is one of the easiest to comprehend in regards to climate change, but maybe one of the least appreciated in that regards, where we see media results of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and we lose focus that every year more people die from extreme heat and heat-related illnesses than the natural disasters in general. It highlights a myriad of health-related issues, be it from heat-related illness and stress, but also to mental health, and highlights health disparities intrinsic into our society, where access to cooling centers, the ability to adapt just by using the air conditioning unit, and also access to care is just one other example of how this climate change crisis is highlighting issues already embedded in our healthcare system. And finally, I think it's important to note that even if we do everything correct and tomorrow we decrease emissions to zero, there will still be a residual effect from what we've done already. So over the next 50 years, regardless of what we do, the world will continue to heat and continue to warm. So even if we do focus on mitigating measures and do all we cannot ignore that these heat-related illnesses will become more and more prevalent over the next several decades. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, I'll start with Dr. Susan Yergin. She is an associate professor at University of South Carolina in the athletic training department. She serves on the Natives Research Committee and also is heavily involved with the Corey Stringer Institute Medical Advisory Board. Second will be Shelley Hudson Robinson, who is a project director at Clean Energy Group. Currently, she's focused on Phase Out Speaker Project and Resilient Power Project. She's been involved in various organizations in regards to their energy programs and also focusing on clean energy and advocacy for it. And finally, we have Xavier Boatwright, native from Manning, South Carolina, and a former professional athlete, well aware of the risk of extreme heat. Currently, he's serving as a strategic partnership director at the Conservation Voters of South Carolina to help strengthen the organization and the conservation environmental movement in South Carolina. I'd like to remind our speakers, we'll try to keep it to 10 minutes, which will allow us at least 10 to 15 minutes for questions afterwards. And feel free to share your screen during time frame for any kind of PowerPoint presentation. With that being said, I'd like to start with Dr. Susan Yergin.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. So I was asked to provide us a platform of research in terms of extreme heat and why this might be a problem that we need to be paying attention to. So I'm known for having too many slides, so I might talk fast. All right, so I pulled this definition off of ready.gov, which is an official government site. They define extreme heat as a period of high humidity and temperatures above 90 degrees for at least 2 to 3 days. So I found that definition interesting because this is one of my favorite research studies. These are a few of my friends who did it. What you see at the top, and maybe I should do the disclaimer that I'm a certified athletic trainer, so a lot of my things do have a slant towards athletes, but I do understand the greater population as well in terms of heat illnesses. But what you see in front of you is a map of football players who died from heat stroke. So each circle represents a football player who died from heat stroke. And what you see on the top map is the actual temperature that it was when the football player died. But what I think is more interesting is the bottom map. And the bottom map shows us that those fatality cases that are in black circles, it means that it was way above normal or just above normal for that area's local climate. And that's when the football player died. And then white circles means that was actually below normal for that area. And so I think the take-home message that I want to leave us here is that there's nothing necessarily special about 90 degrees. Of course, that's hot, but that really, when we're talking about heat as a problem that we need to focus on, this is also just about being above normal for that region, and that it doesn't have to be 90, it can be 87, but if that's above normal for the region, it can still be dangerous as in these cases. This is a study that I did looking at emergency medical service dispatches, so 911 calls, and those that were directly related to a heat-related illness. And so the take-home message here is that you can see that every age group is affected by heat illnesses. and that there's not an age group that is immune to being affected by heat. All right, this is an overwhelming graph. This was done by our neighbors in Florida, but the bottom are in orange are work-related heat illnesses, and the ones in blue are non-work-related heat illnesses. And the triangles and the black lines indicate deaths that occurred in Florida. And so once again, I just want to point out that we're concerned rightfully as people who are working in this environment, as we see in the orange lines, but the blue lines indicate that we need to be concerned once again of all ages, and that things happen outside of work, that even the person who is in their home or mowing their lawn or recreationally active is at risk for a heat illness. And then this research study was done by our neighbors in North Carolina. And I felt that it was important to share because we see heat related illnesses in terms of emergency department visits on the left, and then temperatures at the bottom. And we do see that that peak temperature is around 38 C, right around where the government definition was, that website. But really, they pointed out that heat illnesses started to go up at that threshold temperature. And that's nicely pointed out for us. That's around 30 C, which would be about 85 Fahrenheit. So once again, just going back to that, there's nothing special about 90, and that we see heat illnesses at much less than that. How can we measure heat? In athletics and military, we use a measurement called wet bulb globe temperature. I really wanted to educate you on this measure and have it kind of be on your radar. Wet bulb globe temperature, as you can see, takes into account humidity, air temperature, sun exposure, radiant heat from the ground, and wind speed, and it puts it all together into one number. So we consider this a superior measure of environmental heat as compared to below what we're used to when we watch weather reports or we bring something up on our phone. We see heat index, but heat index only takes into account air temperature and humidity. So you can see that's only two inputs, and that wet bulb globe temperature, or I usually say WBGT, all right, has more involved in it. So I think we really need to start getting used to WBGT temperatures more so than heat index when we're looking at weather reports, because it provides a better comprehensive view of the heat stress. And so this is our South Carolina High School Association uses this table to have high school athletics modify their practices to keep athletes safe. This was a great move by our state. I was so happy when they made this. But you can see the WBGT on the left, and then the color risk in the middle, and then how activity has to change based on the WBGT. And what my research team found was that there, even with the modification table, or the mandate, we still had about 100 practices that were held in red risk level, and we still had 54 that were held in black risk level. So they should have been canceled, and they were still held. So, and by the way, this was representative of the whole state. We had 30 high schools across the state give us data for this. But I do overall think that the WBGT policy was a really good move, because you can see that the majority of practices did occur in the lower risk levels. So even though our athletes were practicing in some hot conditions, at least the majority were in lower risk levels. And then this slide might look overwhelming, but we see that yellow, orange, and red risk levels. Once again, this is data from those 30 high schools across the state of South Carolina. you can see that they practiced in hot conditions. At the bottom is early August, late August, early September, late September, and it goes on like that. And the point that I want to make here is that we didn't actually have a drop in temperatures until September. So it remained very hot and did not see an actual drop until the end of September. And then, interestingly, our athletes didn't have all green practices until November. So things in South Carolina stay very hot for those high school athletes that are practicing all the way out to November. And then I forgot that I had that little note at the top that we actually had a recording of over 92 in every portion of the month that the high schools put data in. Thank you. And I did it within my time frame.
That was fantastic, Susan. Thank you. I feel like I need to go get a wet bulb load temp monitor for my home to take care of my kids. Next, I'd like to invite Shelley to share a few words.
Thank you. I have lived in South Carolina for 24 years until last week when I moved back home to North Carolina. And I've been with Clean Energy Group for a little over a year. And I'll tell you a little bit about Clean Energy Group, just kind of so you have a sense, since they're kind of not a South Carolina based organization, but we're increasingly doing work here. So, you know, kind of what we do, know that somebody's working on this and who we are and what our resources are. And then I'll tell you about a really special project that should be of interest. CEG was founded in 1998 in Vermont. And like before CEG, I worked for Upstate Forever in the upstate of South Carolina for 13 plus years. But CEG's mission is to accelerate an equitable and inclusive transition to a resilient, sustainable, clean energy future. And we want to see a clean energy system that strengthens all communities by providing sustainable and affordable power, establishing transparent and inclusive decision-making processes, and building wealth and resilience through equitable access to and ownership of energy technologies that don't harm the health and well-being of individuals and communities or the planet. We're a nonprofit, and we fill a critical gap by advancing new energy initiatives and serving as a trusted source of technical expertise and independent analysis in support of communities and nonprofit advocates and government leaders working on the front lines of climate change and the clean energy transition. We collaborate with partners across private, public, and nonprofit sectors. We specialize in providing resources and assistance relating to emerging technologies, transformative policy, things like that. We believe access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy is a basic human right. And no community should be disproportionately burdened by negative health, economic, or environmental impacts resulting from practices relating to the extraction, production, or consumption of energy. So toward that end, we established the Resilient Power Project in 2013. And the Resilient Power Project has advanced the deployment of resilient clean energy solutions, primarily through solar paired with battery storage in critical community facilities serving environmental justice communities, low-income communities, and communities of color all over the country. The project's goal is to advance clean energy equity and build energy security. The project director for that is actually my colleague, Marielle Mango. And one key feature of the Resilient Power Project, or the RPP, is our Technical Assistance Fund. And that supports community service providers by awarding grant funding for additional technical expertise to perform solar and battery storage feasibility assessments at specific facilities. And this feasibility assessment is the first step in the development process, giving organizations the information they need to engage potential developers or to pursue implementation funding opportunities. You can't go ask for funding for a resilience hub for your community center or your church if you don't know what the building needs, if you don't know how much it's going to cost. But getting that first piece of information can be very difficult. So we fill that gap. We fund that technical assessment. Now, one of our latest technical assessment fund awardees, we call it the TAF, went to Glad Tidings Church in Hayward, California, near San Francisco. And this is a really amazing project. But I'll tell you a little bit about Glad Tidings. Glad Tidings serves the second most racially diverse community in California and has partnered with the Red Cross to provide disaster relief services during earthquakes. The congregation is mobilized to serve other communities when needed, such as during Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey in Galveston, and the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. Locally, they provide hunger relief services. They have an emergency rental assistance program, COVID testing and vaccinations, grief support, cancer support programs, much like so many South Carolina churches. You know, churches kind of do everything for the community. So they saw the need to have independent, resilient power, while also being a catalyst for an equitable, clean energy transition in their surrounding neighborhood. Now, the reason we're especially excited about this project is I think it can be a model for other churches that serve their communities. It's really innovative because they are going to use a small fleet of electric vehicles, two Nissan Leafs and a Kia EV6 SUV. That's going to be the backup battery that can run the complex during an outage. And they have 5 buildings on their campus, and those buildings will undergo a thorough energy efficiency retrofit, refrigerators, lighting. They'll eliminate on-site gas consumption on the campus. They'll have solar on roofs and on a carport. And then they'll have EV charging stations. And this is also another really cool feature, I think. They're going to have EV charging stations available to the public. Then they'll charge money for the privilege of, charging, just like if you go fill up for gas, you pay to charge your car. But those funds will help provide revenue to the church. And they're doing this almost exclusively, all this work, all of the vendors for all of this and all of the technical expertise is almost exclusively Black-owned businesses. So that, I think we're going to have a webinar featuring Glad Tidings and their assessment company, which is Gemini Solutions, I think in August. And then in South Carolina, we awarded a TAF to Habitat for Humanity up in Greenville to look at the feasibility of adding solar plus storage for resilience to a new habitat development in Greenville in the Nicholtown community. That's still, we would like to see that kind of what we're thinking about with that turn into perhaps a national model for habitat, for any habitat community. That's kind of how we work. Like if we see something that we think can be scaled to a national level, that helps communities at a national level, we kind of try to make that happen. So we're still working on that one. We also have 3 new potential projects in South Carolina. The Gullah Geechee Nation is one, Upstate Circle of Friends, and I believe Gethsemane Baptist Church. So more and more churches, traditionally we funded, we saw these kind of resilience hub developments on community centers and schools and things like that, but we're increasingly seeing them on churches, and that to me as a Southerner is just so appropriate. Because that is where many Southern communities are grounded, is in their churches, and that's where if something happens in a community, a lot of times the first place someone goes to look for help is the church. The power's out. Oh, can I go there to get cool? Something like that. So I can kind of stop there, and then look forward to questions at the end.
Yeah, that was fantastic and really interesting. I love the collaboration between all sectors for these adaptive measures and the ability to translate these projects all over. I mean, it kind of encompasses both aspects that we're talking about with the mitigation aspect of clean energy and also providing the adaptability for people to be able to be resilient to these extreme heats. With that, I'd like to give Xavier his chance to talk to.
Thank you. So I just had a few things I wanted to cover just about adapting to extreme heat in the midst of climate change. As it was said earlier, increasing global temperatures are vastly impacting the globe. And the National Weather Service has identified heat as the single most deadliest weather event in the United States, responsible for more fatalities than floods, lightning, tornadoes, and hurricanes combined. I would like to highlight that people living in cities are already at a higher risk of heat wave because of urban areas being warmer than surrounding non-urban areas due to the heat island effect, where there's less trees, more concrete, more parking lots, areas and types of materials that absorb and hold heat like steel, metal, that you typically find in more urban areas. And people are at higher risk in these areas because it's already warmer. And then there's also, just to improve resilience for future heat events, cities can incorporate heat island reduction strategies such as green or cool roofs, cool pavement. Increased vegetation is a big one. We plant a tree today, I promise the next generation will thank us for it. And there's some examples with some of our partners here in South Carolina who planted trees like 15 years ago, and they've saw a lot of increases, not just in community use of that area, but also long-term, the appraisal values of like those parks that were once open heat fields, now having that tree cover. And then as I was just in Greenville, South Carolina this past weekend, and although it was about 96, 97, oh boy, you gotta love that canopy that Main Street, Greenville is under. And the wind blowing there, you truly get to feel that buffer. And so increased vegetation and trees, and then in long-term planning efforts to lower urban temperatures and accounting for urban systems during extreme heat events and public health. Now, the city of Charleston has already done some heat mapping as a part of a national effort. And that heat mapping is also underway in Columbia and also other parts of the state as a part of a national collaborative with NOAA. And there's plans to do this statewide. And if I can share my screen right quick, I'd like to show you that map really quickly. Oh. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Thanks. So as you can see here, this is the Charleston Peninsula, and definitely the redder areas are the hotter areas. So in this preliminary heat mapping, you can see the urban areas that have more concrete, folks who are familiar with Charleston. And then as you get out into some of the outskirts, some of the islands, places that have more tree cover than maybe downtown Charleston, you also see it starts to get cooler. And then I could also share this in the chat, but charleston-sc.gov and Heat Watch Charleston, they have tons of information on here, probably more information than I could give you, but feel free to poke around here. And then I also have some partners who've actually engaged and were a part of those 27 volunteers that we can connect you with. I'll come back to that, but just as I proceed here, I just wanted to show you that work is underway. And also with some of the preliminary studies and data that's coming out of Columbia, we see the same trend where downtown Columbia, places that seem to have less foliage and green spaces are showing up as hotter spaces. And then there's also an equity correlation there where you tend to see communities of color and low-income communities also having hotter, being in these hotter spots in the cities. So just one of the most effective ways to reduce the negative impacts of extreme heat and an extreme heat event is to develop a comprehensive heat response plan that combines both individual strategies and integrated approaches. And this could be done on the individual level, community level, as well as government and state level. Arizona is known for one of its heat emergency, as well as a lot of other states, but Arizona is a desert type state. It gets pretty hot there. But they're renowned, they have a renowned heat emergency response plan. And in that plan, just some typical assumptions that they make around several, consecutive days of triple-digit heat throughout the summer. There are accounts that they make for the overnight temperatures as well. When you have those consecutive, I think we know that here in South Carolina, you have consecutive triple-digit days. Seems like at night, it doesn't get any lower than 90. So making sure you account for the night effect, and then the populations at risk from heat-related illness, such as very young folks or elderly folks, folks with conditions, pre-existing conditions, as well as socioeconomic factors, and then of course location. Heat stroke is fast setting and it has a high mortality rate. Early identification is best, and then warning and messaging systems, having those up and in place. I think one of the takeaways that that I know I have learned is just once a heat wave has set in, it's kind of too late to start taking these measures. You have to be proactive. And typically in most plans, they try to get at least 5 days ahead of the heat wave. Sometimes with this new climate change reality, we do have violent fluctuations, and sometimes we can't always predict that, but always looking at that 5-day outlook and forecast. So just things that communities can use: comprehensive heat response planning, forecasting and monitoring, looking at things five days or more ahead, education and awareness, developing responses to heat waves and being aware of them, and then last, infrastructure improvements. I would say as far as we talked a little bit about forecasting and monitoring and getting ahead of the game on that, many citizens and cities, for example, the city of Philadelphia, their city staff works to determine when a heat wave is approaching, and started doing this after they had around 700 deaths in 1995. So to really get ahead, they started doing earlier planning. And then for education and awareness, I would say public health outreach ensures health and safety to city dwellers, especially among sensitive groups. Like I mentioned before, those older adults and children, people who work outdoors, making sure that you're taking account for them, and low-income communities, and then providing extreme heat warnings and sharing that information as early as you can before the actual heat comes on. I'll talk a little bit later as we wrap up about some of the symptoms of excessive heat exposure and things that can be done about that. And then responses to heat waves, certain responses that folks can take, just providing community cooling centers. I know that was said earlier on this call, particularly in areas of low income and isolated areas. ensuring the proper function of energy and water systems, because you need to, for that central cooling systems, as well as making sure your water system, you have access to water and air conditioning, and communicating heat warning information across the public, and making sure that that information is properly disseminated to those who are most vulnerable. I would say also, just as we wrap up, some of the potential factors, I guess, for excessive heat and responses to heat. I know we talked some about the increased vegetation, green roofs, cooling pavements, but also wanted to talk about some of the correlations in public health, and then also there's a social justice, or kind of social tie with heat. Historically in the United States, we've seen correlations between heat and crime and violence. And Chicago is, I don't think it's a secret that Chicago is known as one of the homicide capitals of the United States. I think it's called the murder capital. And they have led on a lot of that research and data showing that on hotter days, they have more crime and more homicides. But estimates suggest that relative to cooler days, overall crime rates are higher at a daily maximum when temperatures exceed 75 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is both, this is urban crime in both high income and impoverished communities. So despite socioeconomic factors, you see these correlations historically. And we also see correlations where crime is lower in areas that have more green space and tree cover. Also, these green spaces increased, I think I said that earlier, increase the overall appraisal values and value of the community long-term. And then just as we wrap up, I think it was mentioned, I was a professional athlete, played football. I finished with the Detroit Lions in Detroit, but also played for the Washington Commanders before they changed their name to Commanders. And just wanted to wrap up with talking about staying hydrated, drink water, plenty of it, know the signs of dehydration, check your urine. Usually, especially as an athlete, that was one thing we would always do. Darker urine means you're not hydrated. So the clearer and lighter colored urine means that you're more hydrated. Choose water over alcohol, sugary drinks, and/or caffeine. Just remember to cool down when you get hot. Eat foods with high water content. Fruit is a good example of that. And replenish when you sweat. Be cognizant of how much you're sweating, and then just climate adaptation to extreme heat. As we continue to adjust to extreme heat and heat waves, and increase daytime temperatures, reduce nighttime cooling, higher air pollution levels associated with heat events can affect the human health by contributing to respiratory difficulties, heat cramps, exhaustion, non-fatal heat stroke, and death. And I would just wrap up with South Carolina DHEC has a page where they outline heat-related illnesses. Seems like I can't get my page, but I'll post it in the chat. But just as I wrap up, just encourage folks to check out South Carolina DHEC's page on. Sometimes when I share screen, it takes me a minute. There's the page. It's an easy read. It's about 200 words. Just what are heat-related illnesses, some of the main stages, what are the symptoms, how can you treat these symptoms, and what can be done about heat-related illness. And just want to encourage folks to use that resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. That was fantastic. First, I'd like to encourage anyone listening, any questions you can include in the chat section, and we'll get to those. or you have the little raised hand option on Zoom, and I'll try to kind of scan through the attendees for that. But first, I like to open up selfishly with a question I want to ask. Whenever I have a panel full of experts, I always try to take something away from that that I can carry on forward. So my question to y'all would be, what are some of the challenges you have faced or anticipate facing in your work, be it, presentations for grants or, addressing climate change with faith communities or other projects? So let's start, I believe, let's go with Shelley, and then we'll move to Xavier and finish with Susan.
I've been doing this so long that I have seen quite a change from when people first started talking about climate change. And I remember when you didn't say climate change in South Carolina, and now you can. That's a big change. I think it's, and also I was with Upstate Forever when South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light was formed back in 2011. And it was sort of announced at a conference, at a Creation Care conference that Upstate Forever hosted. I mean, the organization saw back then the importance of churches in the stewardship of the planet. So it was a natural fit there. But I would say getting churches to feel that this issue is not political, to kind of to depoliticize it has been kind of a challenge that has improved through time. I remember when my own church back in Spartanburg, there were folks, the church hostess started, she just switched out all the paper, all the styrofoam coffee cups to ceramic mugs, and she didn't say anything. And she just did it. She did it for a reason. She did it, because she knew what styrofoam cups were doing to the planet. But she also knew that if she said something, it might become political. So she just did it, and nobody really noticed. So the fact that now you don't really have to do that anymore, that's a wonderful evolution, I think, in how far things have come. But that used to be the biggest barrier to addressing these issues with various churches and faith communities.
Yes, thanks. I think I just want to second and piggyback off of some of the things that Shelley said. Early in my career working as an organizer in South Carolina, I quickly realized that the faith community is one of the areas of, I'd say, the highest integrity, as well as the biggest reach as far as reaching communities in South Carolina. You can really get a lot of traction through the faith communities, and it's like I said, it's a point of integrity with folks. The information coming from the faith community, folks tend to trust that information more so than a lot of the other disinformation and things that we get in today's society. And then I'd also say working with some organizers that have a lot more experience with me in navigating that landscape, kind of similar to what Shelley said. They took me to Genesis, and where, it does say that God gave people, dominion over fish, sea, and all of these things. But at the same time, maybe not focusing so much on the word dominion and what that means, but more so maybe in modern times saying stewardship. And how are we honoring that stewardship? If we really were given dominion over these natural resources, how are we stewarding that? And if you do have faith, then, I mean, are we doing what we should be doing when it comes to that? So I think that's something that all of our churches should, churches, faith communities in South Carolina and beyond, should grapple. What are we doing with our resources if we hold that true, that, we have that dominion, and that's something that was divinely given to us. And then I think that's about it. But I just echo in disseminating information, I think the church holds the highest level of integrity, and you can get stuff out so fast. I remember in the pandemic, the churches was like, that was my kind of one of the places to get real-time information really fast. And then it was very coordinated and it was something you could trust.
Well, I don't know. I guess maybe my answer might come across slightly selfish, but the barrier I come across is finding people to support my work. So me and a colleague, a climatologist, submitted a grant to try to create a heat safety table for children in PE classes, as well as children in youth sports, and it wasn't funded. And yeah, I do think that the grant source did understand that heat safety was important, but ultimately it wasn't supported. Whereas PE teachers and youth coaches need heat safety tables to keep our children safe in these hot environments, particularly down here in South Carolina. And that's kind of frustrating. And then same thing, I tried to write a grant where I wanted to figure out what are risk factors for children having heat illnesses. And I reached out to a pediatric research network, and they were like, I don't think we're going to have enough heat illnesses to help you, so no. And so I can honor that they're respecting their time, but same thing, like I think it's important work to understand heat illnesses and keep our children safe, and it's sometimes a struggle to find people to support that.
No, I think that's very on point. And, just personally with my own kids, having that conversation with their coaches now, where he has practices in the morning and also his afternoon practice starts at 7 at night, which is still 90 degrees out there, and had tournaments. It's just incredible how that is received still. I think we have one more minute, and I really want to get to this question, is that moving forward, what do you feel like the next steps we need to take in South Carolina over the next 5 years? Where do you see us moving forward, and where do you see the importance of our efforts being focused on? We'll go backwards this time and start with Susan and finish up with Shelley.
So I'm going to keep with my athletic training slant. And so I guess my answer is going to be, I think that our state high school association needs to continue to make more heat safety policies. I'm very proud of them for making the one table, but there's more to be done in terms of heat acclimatization policies for our youth athletes. And I also think that there needs to be more heat safety policies for our athletes below high school, middle school, and youth programs. Also, just like you were saying, Brandon, like our children should not be practicing, like there should not be a football game in August that's at 12 o'clock for Pop Warner. It's just not a smart idea. That's not safe. And so I think that in terms of youth athletes, there needs to be more safety policies in our state.
I would say for me, just based on my work and engagement, we just conducted a statewide energy survey, listening canvas, and got over like 600, nearly 650 responses. And in that, we asked folks, one of the questions was, how are you adjusting to climate change from an energy efficiency, energy perspective? And most folks, the response was things related to the scorching heat. I think I've never seen the word scorching typed in so many times. So just making sure that those communities, folks, and we specifically targeted communities of color, low-income communities, making sure that those folks are in the conversation and that they have access to information about heat, because in many cases, they're the most vulnerable and in some of these hot spots that we are starting to get data and identify.
And I would say a couple of things. First, a lot more attention an effort to reaching every single voice. And I hold CVSC and Xavier's work up as a model. I've seen how long that project has been to reach out to find all the voices on the energy efficiency issue. You know, that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of reaching deep into the community. And a lot of times that's just not done. And I think CVSC has done an amazing job with that. So I think that in and of itself is a model for other entities to emulate, to take the time and keep putting in the work to reach deep and listen, you know, try to listen deeply. And I think going through the churches is a very important way to do that. And then, so the second point would be that there needs to be more funding, and I think churches to form resilience hubs, to have resilient, whether it's solar and storage, whatever they need to where they can function and continue providing their services during these extreme heat events. If there's a hurricane or if there are floods, like in the upstate or in the PD, and the power's knocked out, the churches are where people go and where people turn for help. And so I think there needs to be a lot more federal funding, quite frankly, directed at those types of projects, recognizing how important they are in the community. And kind of toward that end, I want to put a plug in for the South Carolina Energy Office and South Carolina Office of Resilience, and other folks who have put in at what's called a RACER grant, a federal RACER grant, to basically utilize the congregational model as a way to, and also South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, to find out what communities need for resilience going forward. And you know, that's, again, rather than just being top down, okay, somebody answer my questionnaire, nobody did. Really reaching deeply into the communities and going through the communities of faith to do that, and then connecting federal money to make projects happen.
Great, thank you. And with that, I think we're running short of time, so I'm gonna send it back to Alicia to finish this out. But I'd like to thank our panelists again. This is a great discussion, and I wish I had another hour to kind of pick y'all's brains, but we'll get to that later.
Thank you so much, Brandon and Susan and Shelley and Xavier. There was so much information in your presentations, and I think a lot for us to go back and listen to about ways that we can adapt to the heat. Today is the first day of summer, so this is the time, if we haven't already, to begin planning how we are going to safely do our work and play during the summer months. Also, I want to just lift up all of the wonderful work that's going on across the country, and even here in South Carolina by the Clean Energy Group. I want to also acknowledge the work that Xavier has been leading with the Energy Justice Group to get those surveys done. And those are going to be very important and instrumental when we talk about funding opportunities for the state of South Carolina. And of course, I want to acknowledge the idea for having this forum and this dialogue today, Brandon. So thank you again for leading the way for this. Also, I wanted to just again, note that the Charleston heat mapping project that Xavier brought up, we did an energy forum last year around this time, and Janice Barnes, who leads that Charleston heat mapping project, was our speaker from last year. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about that project, we, I believe, have that recorded and possibly uploaded to YouTube. So do check out our website, www.scipl.org, and our YouTube page, and you can listen to some of our previous recordings. Also, I think that David Johnston is here. And David Johnston, if you wanted to take yourself off of or put your picture on, I just wanted to acknowledge his work and leadership with the Charleston Resilience
Here I am. Can you hear?
Hello here. Yes, so David was also a past speaker for our conversation about heat. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. David, thank you for being with us again.
Thank you, Alicia. This has been a terrific program. What an exciting, important topic this is. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for all the panelists. It's been terrific.
Absolutely. It was amazing. And then, of course, if you did not see the chat, Kirsten Dow did put in the chat that she is currently leading the Columbia heat mapping project. And Kirsten, if you wanted to unmute yourself, if you're still here, and just reiterate what we need to do to get involved in that.
Sure. Really excited about the Columbia Heat Mapping Project. If you want to get involved, I will share the link, which is at the City of Columbia's Climate Protection Action Committee site. I don't have it right in front of me, but I can put it in the chat. It's going to be Columbia, West Columbia, Casey, and parts of Richland County on August 6th, the rain date of the 7th. So looking forward to that, and really looking for people who are interested in a conversation about how to build it into decision making. We're going to have the data, but I'd love to start talking to people who want to make the connections and help embed it in the community in different ways.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirsten, for putting that in the chat and for lifting that project up as well. So a lot of wonderful opportunities. And of course, as Shelley mentioned, wanted to circle back to Shelley's announcement about the webinar in August, where we'll be able to learn more about the work that she is involved in with Glad Tidings Church. So that will be another very important conversation for us to tune into. I want to close us out with Interfaith Power and Light Board Chair, Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley, who is helping us make the connection between our climate and the need for us to really respond to our quickly changing climate and all of the extreme weather conditions that are resulting from that, and our ability to influence how we respond through our vote. And so I'm going to share a video and then a couple of announcements, and then we'll close out.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Dr. Gerald L. Durley, Pastor Emeritus of Providence Missionary Baptist Church here in Atlanta, Georgia, and also Board Chair of Interfaith Power and Light. All over the country, we're very much concerned about a nation that seemingly has become divided along a lot of different lines. And we've got to come together if we're to be the kind of country that we think that we should be and know that we can become. We're very much concerned about the climate crisis. I was not that involved in climate awareness at least 10 years ago. I was always a civil rights advocate, and we knew that it was our constitutional right to have the right to vote, the right to buy houses where we were, the equal education and health care. Those were constitutional rights that we were willing to stand up for and vote that we might have them. Now in 2022, I feel the same way about the climate crisis. It is a constitutional right for everyone to have clean water, clean air, to have streams, pristine, clean streams that we can drink from and fish in and recreational purposes, but that's being denied. And one of the ways that we can fight this large issue, this profit over people, these energy companies, these gas and oil and gas companies, is to vote. Voting is a constitutional right, and it is sacred to democracy. So I want each of you to consider registering as many people as you can who are eligible to vote. Once you get them registered, what good is it to be registered unless you educate them about what it is that we need to do? Everything is interconnected. Education, science, faith, health, certainly the environment. So we want to educate people how important it is to go out and vote legislatively for the bills in your state and at the federal level. And when we come together and our voices become our vote, and our vote becomes our voices, then we can save not only the next generation, but certainly this generation. I joined voices with Dr. King when he said that the faith community must be the moral consciousness of America. We are in an ethical and a moral war. And this is how we win, when we come together and understand that God gave us a perfectly balanced ecological world, and we have destroyed it because of our own greed. So let us all come together. Get registered to vote. Understand what you're voting for, and then get out to vote. That's what we've got to do as a team, as a family. And remember this, when it seems so foreboding and you feel like giving up, we didn't give up. We didn't quit. We didn't turn around. We didn't back up. We didn't bend. We didn't bow, nor did we break. But what we did, we voted. That's. Hello, I'm the Reverend Dr. Gerald L. Durley,
Okay.
Pastor Emeritus of Providence Missionary Baptist Church.
All right, so with that, I don't have to say any more about the importance of our vote, but I will go ahead and let you know, August 18th and 19th, we will be hosting a resilience summit in partnership with some of our partner, Interfaith Power and Light, our Georgia neighbor, and our North Carolina neighbor, and Creation Justice Ministries. So we will have more information about our initiative to encourage people to get educated on this topic and to use their vote to ensure that we have the funds, the budgets that we need to address our climate. Thank you again for being here, for participating in this conversation, this timely conversation on this first day of summer, and blessings to all of you. Take care.